All right, let's dive right into this explainer and trace the chaotic, multi-year survival campaign that permanently altered East-West relations. The First Crusade is one of those historical events that sounds like it was pulled straight out of a dark fantasy novel. We're talking massive armies, impossible sieges, supposed miracles, and incredibly brutal slaughter. But it was entirely real, and its ripples are absolutely still felt today.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll start with the call to holy war, move through the doomed People's Crusade and the march of the feudal lords, check out the miracle at Antioch, witness the storming of Jerusalem, and finally, look at the precarious new world it all left behind.
So you kind of have to wonder, how in the world did a simple request for some mercenary backup spiral into a massive 200-year holy war? Well, to understand how this highly improbable military success catalyzed centuries of conflict, we first have to look at the total geopolitical meltdown that kicked it all off.
Part 1. The Call to Holy War, a desperate plea and a papal promise. Let's set the stage by examining the cascading crises that basically forced the Byzantine Empire to beg the West for help.
Things were going downhill really fast for the Byzantines. In 1071, the Seljuk Turks hand them a crushing defeat at the Battle of Manzikert. Then, in 1092, the great Seljuk Sultan dies, and his massive empire just fragments into rival factions. Pure chaos. Sensing a sliver of opportunity amidst all this, the Byzantine Emperor Alexius I shoots off a letter to Pope Urban II in 1095, practically begging for military aid. And the Pope? Well, he sees a golden opportunity here, a real chance to unify a fractured church, assert his own authority, and reclaim Jerusalem. While preaching in France, the Pope offered these incredibly violent medieval knights what was essentially an unbelievable spiritual loophole. Go east, fight for the church, and you'll save your soul from the fires of hell. I mean, talk about an incentive, right? They were desperate for salvation, and they answered his call with roaring crowds shouting, Deus vult! God wills it!
Part 2. The Doomed People's Crusade. Fervor, Massacre, and Destruction. You see, the viral success of the Pope's pitch had immediate and deeply tragic, unintended consequences, before the real official army even got its boots on.
It's absolutely crucial to understand the night and day difference between the two waves of Crusaders. First up was the catastrophic People's Crusade. Led by a charismatic priest named Peter the Hermit, this was a poorly armed, totally ill-disciplined mob of thousands. Whipped into a frenzy of prejudice, they actually slaughtered around 5,000 Jewish men, women, and children in the Rhineland before they even left Europe. When they finally crossed into Anatolia, they were swiftly ambushed and wiped out by the Turks. But hot on their heels, the Prince's Crusade. This was the highly organized, heavily armed feudal army led by Europe's most powerful lords.
Which brings us to Part 3, March of the Feudal Lords, the Princes Converge. Let's see how this massive official military juggernaut actually navigated the treacherous path through hostile territory.
60,000. Think about that number for a second. That is the staggering size of the combined Crusader force arriving at Constantinople around December 1096. We are literally talking about the largest army seen in Europe since the fall of the Roman Empire. The Byzantine emperor, who remember was just expecting a handful of mercenaries, was understandably sweating. He forced the Crusader leaders to swear oaths of loyalty to him before he'd even ferry them across the water into enemy lands.
Now, out of the gate, they had some solid wins, but it quickly turned into a brutal test of pure endurance. They took Nicaea, though the Byzantines sneakily accepted the surrender behind their backs, which definitely angered the Crusaders. Then they barely scraped through a massive ambush at Dorylaeum by adapting on the fly to fast Turkish hit-and-run cavalry tactics. But man, despite those early victories, the terrain was just devastating. Marching through the mountains, the blistering heat wiped out their supplies and pack animals. It's also worth noting that during this grueling trek, a lord named Baldwin actually splinters off, heads east, and captures Edessa, setting up the very first Crusader state.
Moving on to Part 4, the miracle at Antioch, starvation and salvation. By October 1097, the exhausted army reaches Antioch, an absolutely massive, seemingly impregnable city where the whole campaign almost crashed and burned. They spend a horrendous winter trapped outside the walls, literally starving to death. Finally, a crusader named Bohemond manages to bribe a tower guard, and the Christian forces pour into the city. But wouldn't you know it, almost instantly, a giant Muslim relief army shows up and traps them inside. So now they're the ones besieged, they're starving, and morale is at rock bottom. That is, until they discover something: the Holy Lance. Now, regardless of its historical authenticity, finding what they believed to be the spear that pierced Christ's side completely reignited their fanaticism.
Fueled by this absolute fanatical zeal and claiming they were seeing visions of saints riding alongside them, these starving soldiers burst out of Antioch's gates and miraculously routed the giant Muslim army. It's a staggering victory that saved them from total annihilation. But to be clear, the aftermath was incredibly ugly. It devolved into vicious infighting among the commanders and led to a truly horrific massacre of civilians at a nearby town called Ma'ara.
And that leads us to part 5, the storming of Jerusalem, the final bloody goal. Pushed forward by the ordinary, rank-and-file soldiers who were just sick and tired of their lords bickering over land, the survivors marched south into newly conquered Fatimid territory, finally reaching their ultimate target.
12,000. Let that sink in. Out of the 60,000 that started this trick, only this tiny fraction of exhausted, battered fighting men actually made it. In June 1099, they're standing outside Jerusalem facing poisoned wells, a completely stripped landscape, and the brutal summer heat. They didn't even have enough manpower to fully encircle the city walls.
So, a long drawn-out siege? Totally off the table. They had to rely on a crazy, desperate sequence of events to take the city by storm. When some Genoese ships arrived on the coast, the sailors actually dismantled their own boats just to provide desperately needed timber. I mean, tearing apart your only ride home to build 2 giant siege towers, that is commitment. Then Commander Godfrey pulls a brilliant tactical move, relocating his tower in the dead of night to a weaker section of the wall. And on July 15th, 1099, they finally break through.
But the climax of this whole campaign is undeniably grim. Once they breach those walls, overcome by religious euphoria and just pure bloodlust, the Crusaders went on an absolute rampage. It was a horrific, prolonged massacre. Soldiers, civilians, Jews, Muslims, everyone was butchered. The Crusaders achieved their ultimate objective, yes, but we absolutely have to recognize they did it in an incredibly barbaric fashion.
Part 6. A precarious new world. Victory and 2 centuries of conflict. With Jerusalem firmly in their hands and a Fatimid relief army crushed shortly after at Ascalon, the immediate goal was technically achieved. But the long-term fallout? That was just getting started.
300. Once the dust settled and they felt their religious vows were fulfilled, the vast majority of these guys just packed up and walked home to Europe. They left behind a shockingly small garrison, just 300 knights under Godfrey of Bouillon to defend their brand new conquest. Oh, and the ultimate irony here? Pope Urban II, the guy who sparked this whole thing, died just 2 weeks after Jerusalem fell. He never even knew his massive gamble was a success.
So they set up 4 Crusader states in the east: the Kingdom of Jerusalem, the County of Tripoli, the Principality of Antioch, and the County of Edessa. But just picture their geographical reality. These new territories were completely isolated, basically tiny islands surrounded by hostile neighbors. The Islamic world was fractured when the Crusaders first arrived, sure, but that wasn't going to last forever. They would eventually unite and launch a massive holy war of their own in response.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this dark legacy to chew on. Was the First Crusade a miraculous victory against completely impossible odds, or was it just the opening shot of an endless, bloody tragedy? This one chaotic campaign achieved what seemed literally impossible, but in the process, it turned the Holy Land into a battleground for almost 200 years. Thank you for exploring this history with me, and I definitely encourage you to keep questioning the past that built our present.